Now that we have discussed representation rights, it is important to understand another fundamental aspect of workplace investigations: compelled participation. Compelled participation refers to an employer's authority to require employees to participate in legitimate workplace investigations and provide information relevant to the matter being examined. While many employees cooperate voluntarily because they understand the importance of maintaining a safe and respectful workplace, there may be situations where an employee refuses to participate, avoids answering questions, or believes they are not required to assist with the investigation. In these circumstances, employers generally rely on their management authority to issue what are known as lawful and reasonable directions. The ability to require participation usually comes from several sources. First, employers generally have an implied right under the employment relationship to direct employees to participate in reasonable workplace processes that are necessary for the operation of the organization. Conducting investigations into misconduct, harassment, safety concerns, or policy violations is part of an employer's responsibility to manage the workplace effectively. Second, participation requirements may arise from employment contracts or collective agreements. In unionized environments, collective bargaining agreements may establish specific obligations and procedures regarding employee participation in workplace investigations. Third, many organizations include investigation cooperation requirements in their workplace policies, codes of conduct, or employee handbooks. These policies communicate that employees have a responsibility to cooperate with legitimate organizational inquiries. However, the ability to require participation does not mean that employers can use unlimited pressure. The process must always remain reasonable, respectful, and consistent with principles of procedural fairness. If an employee refuses to participate after receiving a lawful direction, that refusal may have consequences. Depending on the circumstances, failure to attend an interview, refusal to answer reasonable questions, or deliberate obstruction of an investigation may be considered misconduct or insubordination. Possible consequences may include disciplinary action, and in serious cases, continued refusal to cooperate may become a separate basis for discipline, including termination of employment. This is because employees are generally expected to fulfill their workplace obligations, including assisting with legitimate investigations. In some situations, an organization may place an employee on administrative leave while determining how to proceed. This may allow the employer to protect the integrity of the investigation while addressing the employee's refusal to participate. A common misconception is that employees have an automatic right to remain silent during a private workplace investigation. It is important to distinguish between a criminal investigation conducted by government authorities and an internal workplace investigation conducted by an employer. Constitutional protections against self-incrimination, such as the right to remain silent in criminal proceedings, generally do not apply in the same way to private workplace investigations. A workplace investigator is not a police officer, and an internal investigation is not a criminal trial. Therefore, employees generally cannot rely on criminal procedural protections as a reason to refuse all participation. However, investigators should also understand that the duty to cooperate and the duty to provide truthful information may come from different sources. Employees may have obligations under employment contracts, workplace policies, or professional standards. Providing false information, misleading investigators, or intentionally withholding relevant facts may itself become a separate workplace violation. At the same time, an employer's authority to require participation has important limits. An investigator must never use physical force, threats, intimidation, or unlawful restraint to obtain answers. For example, an investigator should never lock the door, physically block an employee from leaving, or suggest that the employee cannot leave until they provide a confession. Such actions could create serious legal risks, including allegations of false imprisonment or coercion. A professional investigator should establish a respectful environment from the beginning of the interview. The employee should understand the purpose of the meeting, the importance of cooperation, and that the organization is seeking accurate information rather than forcing a predetermined conclusion. If an employee chooses not to cooperate despite being given a fair opportunity, the investigator must proceed carefully and document the situation. For example, if an employee repeatedly responds with statements such as, "I don't know," or "I don't remember," When the circumstances suggest they should have relevant knowledge, the investigator should record those responses accurately and assess them together with all other available evidence. The investigator should avoid making assumptions, but should recognize that a person's failure to provide an explanation may affect the overall assessment of the evidence. Detailed documentation is essential. Investigators should record the questions asked, the employee's responses, any refusal to answer, any explanation provided for refusing, and the steps taken to encourage participation. If an employee continues to refuse cooperation after being given a reasonable opportunity to participate, the organization may proceed with the investigation based on the evidence available. The key principle is that workplace investigations require a balance. Employers have the authority to investigate and require cooperation, but employees must still be treated with dignity, fairness, and respect. Effective investigators understand that the purpose of compelled participation is not to force a confession. The purpose is to ensure that all relevant information can be considered so that the organization can reach a fair, objective, and defensible conclusion.